Napoleon Bonaparte once faced an enemy he never expected: thousands of rabbits. This is the bizarre but true story of how the greatest military mind in history was defeated by fluffy creatures. A tale so strange it sounds like fiction, but history has a sense of humor. The year was 1807. Fresh from signing the Treaty of Tilsit with Russia, Napoleon Bonaparte stood as the undisputed master of continental Europe. His empire was at its zenith, his power absolute. After years of relentless campaigning, the Emperor of France was finally at peace. From the gilded halls of his palace, he now presided over a dominion greater than any since the Romans, and he was eager to enjoy the spoils of victory. To celebrate this monumental diplomatic triumph, his loyal chief of staff, Marshal Alexandre Berthier, planned a special event. Berthier was a master of logistics, a man who could move armies with clockwork precision. For his emperor, he chose a classic aristocratic diversion, a grand rabbit hunt. It was meant to be a leisurely day in the country, a chance for Napoleon and his officers to unwind. Berthier, ever eager to impress, spared no expense. He wanted to ensure a spectacular day of sport, with plenty of targets for the imperial party. He ordered his men to procure a veritable army of rabbits. Some sources claim as many as 3,000. But here, the marshal's legendary planning hit a critical snag. Capturing that many wild rabbits was a logistical nightmare, so his men took a fateful shortcut. Instead of trapping wild, skittish creatures, they simply purchased tame rabbits from local farmers. These were not animals conditioned to flee at the first sign of danger. These were docile, farm-raised bunnies who had spent their entire lives associating humans with one thing, and one thing only: food. And so, on the appointed day, the imperial party arrived. Napoleon, the conqueror of nations, stepped onto the field with his decorated officers, ready for what should have been a simple, relaxing hunt. The cages were lined up, the beaters were in position. The stage was set for a day of imperial sport. What could possibly go wrong? The year is 1807. Fresh from signing the treaties of Tilsit, Napoleon was at the zenith of his power. To celebrate, a grand rabbit hunt was organized. The emperor took his position, rifle in hand, flanked by his officers. They all expected a simple day's sport, easy target practice, as the rabbits scattered into the woods. At the signal, the doors to dozens of wooden cages creaked open, and out poured a furry torrent. Not just hundreds, but by some accounts, nearly 3,000 rabbits flooded the field. But a moment of confusion fell over the hunting party. Instead of fleeing for the woods, the entire furry mass turned as one. With a unified purpose, they charged straight toward Napoleon and his men. Initial chuckles from the officers quickly died. This was an attack. The emperor, a man who had faced the armies of Europe without flinching, found himself under assault by a relentless wave of fluffy creatures. The furry tide washed over their polished boots, swarming the bewildered generals. They weren't aggressive, but determined, climbing up their legs and nibbling at their uniforms. These were men who had strategized Austerlitz. Now they used riding crops and shouts of disbelief to fight off an army of bunnies. The main column of this bunny battalion made a beeline for the emperor. Some bold rabbits even scaled his iconic uniform, treating the master of Europe not as a conqueror, but as a tardy farmer. If you're enjoying these bizarre historical tales, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more incredible stories from history. Trust me, history is full of surprises you never learned in school. The situation had completely spiraled out of control. The dignified imperial hunt had devolved into a frantic, farcical comedy of errors. Coachmen and servants rushed onto the field with nets and brooms, but for every rabbit they shooed away, more took its place. The reason for their boldness was a critical mistake. These were domesticated rabbits, not wild ones. They saw the most important man on the field and, expecting to be fed, showed no intention of leaving. Finally, realizing the battle was lost, the great Napoleon Bonaparte was forced to retreat. He fled to his carriage, pursued by the fluffy horde, tossing bunnies from the window as his coachman spurred the horses to escape. As Napoleon finally found refuge in his carriage, the engine of his retreat, he was left to process the sheer absurdity of what had just happened. Surrounded by a few persistent rabbits, still hoping for a handout, he must have reflected on this most unusual defeat. For a man whose entire life was a testament to control and meticulous planning, this moment of pure unscripted chaos must have been deeply unsettling, perhaps even more so than a conventional military setback. The victors, meanwhile, remained on the field of battle. They weren't celebrating or planting a flag. They were simply doing what rabbits do, munching on grass, twitching their noses, and enjoying the sudden abundance of discarded carrots. They were completely oblivious to the fact that they had just routed the Grande Armée's commander, humiliating the most powerful man in Europe. To them, he wasn't an emperor. He was just a big human who failed to deliver the promised snacks. The story, of course, had to be recorded. Eyewitness accounts captured the farcical scene for posterity. But imagine being Marshal Berthier, the man responsible for the logistics. How do you even begin to write the official report? Your Majesty, the hunt was eventful. The embarrassment wasn't just Napoleon's. It was shared by his entire entourage, whose primary job was to ensure the Emperor's day went smoothly and projected an aura of power. This was a catastrophic failure of event planning. His officers likely spent the rest of the day in frantic damage control. But a story this good is impossible to contain. Despite attempts to keep it quiet, the tale began to leak, traveling not in official dispatches, but in the way all the best gossip travels, through private letters, whispers between servants, and the loose tongues of diplomats. From Paris, the story of Napoleon's rabbit defeat spread through the courts of Europe like wildfire. In London, Vienna, and St. Petersburg, Napoleon's enemies howled with laughter. For them, it was a delicious piece of propaganda, a sign that the Corsican ogre was not invincible after all. His allies, on the other hand, could only cringe. Political cartoonists, especially the viciously talented British satirists, had a field day. They churned out drawings of the mighty emperor being chased by fluffy bunnies, his imperial eagle replaced by a carrot, his grand army reduced to a panicked mob fleeing a cotton-tailed menace. The tale quickly became a favorite dinner party anecdote across the salons of European high society. A perfect, light-hearted story to cut the tension of constant warfare. And for Napoleon, a man who understood the power of image better than almost anyone, this was particularly mortifying. He had meticulously crafted his public persona as an invincible military genius, a stoic Roman-style emperor. This incident was a comical, undeniable crack in that carefully constructed facade. Here was the man who, just 2 years earlier at Austerlitz, had crushed the combined armies of Austria and Russia in his greatest victory. This was the general who had redrawn the map of Europe with his sword. And yet, this very same military titan was sent fleeing by a swarm of hungry, domesticated bunnies. The contrast was almost too perfect. A cosmic joke played at the expense of the world's most powerful man, the conqueror of empires, defeated by a catering mistake. And so, the rabbit hunt of 1807 entered the annals of history as one of its most peculiar and delightful footnotes. It's a perfect reminder that history isn't just a sequence of battles and treaties. It's full of unexpected, absurd moments that reveal the vulnerable human side of its great players. Napoleon's career was far from over. He would go on to face the disastrous invasion of Russia, the sting of defeat at Leipzig, and his ultimate downfall at Waterloo. He would experience the humiliation of exile. first to Elba and finally to the remote island of Street Helena. His legacy is one of immense complexity, a brilliant reformer and a ruthless tyrant, a military genius and a man whose ambition plunged a continent into war. But among all the grand victories and crushing defeats, perhaps none was quite as bizarre or as uniquely humbling as his encounter with Marshal Berthier's Fluffy Brigade. It proves that no matter how much power you accumulate, no matter how many armies you command, some forces of nature are simply beyond your control. We hope you enjoyed this incredible tale of imperial misadventure. If you had fun learning about Napoleon's most unusual battle, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more stories from the strange side of history. And we'd love to know in the comments what other bizarre historical events should we investigate next. Your suggestions help shape our future content. Not even the greatest general in modern history could win a war against a battalion of hungry bunnies. 10-minute story. Every day, a new pill of curiosity.